Brent Jones. My channel is the review channel. Today I'm going to be discussing Oscar Wilde's book, The Picture of Dorian Gray. This book is well known. A lot of people know what it's about, but it was written quite a while back. The copy that I first read, this one, was printed in the 1960s. As you can see, 35 cents is all this book cost me in the original days. It says Dell Laurel Edition up in the other corner. So things have changed, but I reread this book a couple of times over those years, and as well as in the early years, and then I reread it recently, and I wrote a review on my website, connectedeventsmatter.com, and I put a lot of little blurbs about it on social media, bringing people's attention to it. I got an awful lot of response off the social media. It surprised me a little bit. So I have another section in my website about assumptions and symbolism that some of these books represent. And so I wrote a chapter on the symbolism of it in my website. But today I want to talk just briefly about the book and an interesting conclusion that I'm going to challenge that conclusion. I think the book is erred in its conclusion, but it's a very common error, and I think it's been bought hook, line, and sinker by a lot of people in society, and I think a lot of people who read the book accept the error. And the author, Oscar Wilde, I think he's kind of represented by Basil Harwood, the painter, because Oscar Wilde, he loves art. He thinks that anybody that finds ugly meaning in beautiful things is corrupt. And that theme kind of extends into this book. And the painter, Basil Harwood, is a very moral guy. He certainly doesn't represent sin in any way. He paints this picture of Dorian Gray. And Dorian Gray apparently is just a very, very beautiful young man. I've seen pictures that they use to represent him, and I guess they're beautiful young men. And the picture on this book is not necessarily a beautiful young man. I think it's meant to convey that he might have been, and he started to deteriorate. But then this Lord Henry is kind of the third character that's kind of important. There's a lot of other characters, but Lord Henry is a narcissist. He has his own form of hedonism that he preaches. He believes in getting a lot of pleasure from sin. He literally falls in love with Dorian. Falls in love with the picture first. Thinks the picture is so beautiful, and the artist thinks the picture is so beautiful. The artist thinks it's the best thing he's ever done. It's his greatest painting, and the Lord Henry lusts after the picture because the young man is so beautiful. And it's interesting the way the plot centers around those kinds of feelings. Dorian, as he's being painted, the artist friend Lord Henry is sitting there in the studio preaching his hedonism, his pleasure at all costs, his ideology, and Dorian is listening. He's listening closely. Eventually, Dorian takes the painting home because he too has fallen in love with it, and he's hanging it there in his home. But he's also now been affected by the things that Lord Henry has taught him and preached to him. And Dorian makes a conscious decision to go out and sin, to go out and try everything that he can. So he begins. But as he begins that life's mission, he feels that it's changing him. And his assumption is that it's going to hurt his beauty. That's an interesting assumption, that it's going to hurt his beauty. He figures that if he continues on this life of hedonistic pleasure that eventually all this beauty that is captured in the painting that he sees will be gone in him. So he makes a deal. Did he make a deal with the devil? You know, there's some critiques of this book that says, no, he didn't make the deal with the devil, he made the deal with the picture. Well, if the devil exists, then I don't think the picture existed. One way or another, he made a deal with the dark side. And the deal was simply this: all the effects of sin and age would affect the painting and not Dorian Gray. And so he continued on his hedonistic course. There's some people that lost their life because of him. That certainly had a great deal of effect. In fact, he saw that on the painting almost the same day. He'd go home every day and check the painting, and he'd almost daily detect little changes in the painting. And he looked in the mirror and didn't see any changes in himself. So he just had this kind of a sinful life. Eventually, it all got the best of him. Eventually, he was horrified and couldn't stand the painting. And eventually, the painting brings about his death. And I guess you'll have to read it to find that out exactly, now that I've given everything else away. But, you know, I don't want to give the punchline away. But anyway, in the end, he was taken by the painting. Now, what is it that you could argue about philosophically as you listen to this story? Well, I think it's kind of ironic that we have Oscar Wilde, who loves beauty, who thinks that anybody that thinks something beautiful is ugly is corrupt. You know, the equating of good and evil to beauty and ugly. You don't hear that challenged much. You read the different people that have reviewed this book, and I read a few of them, and nobody ever challenges that. But isn't that ironic? Because the book is about good and evil, isn't it? And should we assume that good is beautiful? Because I think we do. I think beautiful people are thought of as being good, at least in the first impression. And ugly people are thought of as being flawed, or, you know, something must be wrong. It's like in the scriptures when they came to Christ and said, you know, this poor wretched fool here, you need to heal him, but what did he do wrong? Maybe he did it in the pre-existence. What did he do wrong? Because deformity and lack of beauty seem to have always been assumed to be sinful, to be related with sin. And is that right? Because the longer you live, the longer you realize that you don't judge books by their cover, that what is beautiful is inside, not outside. I think what's outside, most of us realize that it's the genes that made a person beautiful on the outside. But if you got great genes and you come across really beautiful, it doesn't mean you're good. But this book doesn't even bother to question that. In fact, it uses that assumption to teach us whatever it was that Oscar Wilde wanted to teach us. And so it is interesting. If you want to know more, come to my website. I'll try to get a post here on the video showing you the site. It's www.connectedeventsmatter.com. And go to the reviews. And also there's authors and symbolism, and there's some discussion about this, and I probably covered a little broader subjects there on the website, but this is quite an interesting book, and it has just as much relevance today as it did then, if it ever did, I guess. But I'm glad to be able to bring these thoughts to you, and appreciate you spending some time. I hope you'll follow me on my videos. I trying to add a few more. I've got 2 channels. One channel is on reviews of all kinds, largely books, but there's other kinds of reviews that I have on there, or intend to. And the other one is about career development. And so, 2 channels. Thank you for coming today.